Here's how I captured over 30 pieces of professional content for a brand to post every single day for a month straight in less than 1 day. Now I know what you're thinking. If you're a small business owner, that's a lot of content and that's a lot of times to be posting. But to be honest, that's your starting point. You should be posting at least once a day. Yes, weekends included. I think that the more content that you get out there, the more you're in front of your audience, the more they get to know about your product. But one of the main struggles a lot of people have is knowing what content to post and how do they get so much volume. If you haven't been posting that often already, it probably seems daggone near impossible to get that much content. And if you do, you feel like you're probably just doing whatever trend is out there. Well, I'm here to tell you it's a lot more simple than you think. And let's jump right into it and break it down, how we actually did this. So before we filmed, I got to learn any and everything about this brand. I got a full introduction to who they were, what they were looking to capture, and overall, how I might be able to assist to showcase them in their best light. Yield Coffee Roasters, based out of Cincinnati, Ohio, is a local coffee company that has a really strong brand, and their brand is built upon efficacy. This is something that I learned over and over and over again as we were in our first introductory call. So basically, they only source their coffee from farms that have a certain level of testing that classify it as a high grade or more boutique type of coffee. Not only do they work with coffee partners and farmers that allow them to have that level of coffee, but they make sure that they're ethically achieving that level of coffee. This was something I was not familiar with, that there are really unethical ways to achieve coffee, but if I think about it, there's really unethical ways to do any sort of farming. So then when they actually partner with cafes, this is one thing that they can assure their customers of as they're purchasing and drinking coffee. It's one of their mission statements and something that they really stand behind. But again, I would have never known any of this without that first initial introductory call. So once I understood what they stood for, it was pretty easy to determine what their overall goal was and what they wanted people to know about their brand. And this leads me to my second point. You need to start at the end. If you're gonna make a lot of content for a month and you wanna showcase your brand, you have to start at the end. Figure out what you want to be known for. If you want to be known as a local company, small business that everyone wants to go to, figure out what your edge is that you have over your competition and start there. Like I said, with Yield, their edge that they have over their competition is they only seek out ethical-based coffee farmers. One of the ways that we figured out how to start at the end with Yield Coffee Roasters is we figured out that they really want to be a relationship partner with their customers. They do a lot of different things, including barista training. They help people understand how to properly roast their coffee that they're providing them with and how to make sure they get the best quality taste and being able to serve that to their customers within their cafes. In fact, they personally go to the different cafes in order to do that type of training. Mind-blowing, really, really cool thing. Knowing that the end goal for them is to build better relations from a business-to-business standpoint with different cafes, it made it a lot easier to determine that if we're trying to build better relationships, the people need to know who we are. We could then showcase them some of our products and the way we go about creating those products. So the way that they roast, how long they roast things for, why they do certain techniques in order to make sure they highlight the aromas of a coffee the way that they do, all of that went into content creation. And this brings me to my third point, creating buckets. You have to have buckets in which you put your content in. As I just stated, we had 3 different buckets that we filmed all of our content in. Identifying the relationships that Yield Coffee Roasters had with other businesses and what they could ultimately provide them with. Identifying who Yield Coffee Roasters is as a whole, what their brand is made of. This includes the people that work there, the location, where they source their coffee beans from, etc. And then finally, how they go about doing their roasting process. What temperatures do they actually roast at? How do they make their dark roast versus their light roast? How do they go about scoring their coffee and determining what notes it highlights in order to serve it to cafes and ultimately what brings it to a person when they go to purchase one of their cups of coffee. So once we figured out those 3 different buckets, it made it super simple to make content within each one of those buckets. Now I know what you're already thinking. You just did the math and you said, okay, 3 different buckets, there was 30 pieces of content, there's 30 days in most months, so they just did 10 in each bucket. Ideally, that's what you would want to do with a company, but the reality is that's not always the case. Sometimes you might have 15 things that'll go in bucket 2, and you might have 5 things that'll go in bucket 3. As long as you're being consistent, you're starting to formulate brand awareness overall throughout all of your content. And as you add more time into things, it becomes even easier to fill those buckets and to make more consistent content as time goes along. So recapping things, we had pre-production phone calls and introductory call to figure out more about the brand. We started with the end. What is their end goal? And then third, we went and created buckets in order to fit that content within. That made things so easy that by the time we showed up to actual shoot day, it was pretty much plug and play. Now, in all actuality, we had multiple days that we shot, but the total amount of hours that we shot were less than the course of a day. That's why when I opened up this video, I said it took us less than a day to film everything. We spent maybe 2 hours one day, 3 hours another day, but we had about 3 different days that we consistently met in order to get some content. And for the most part, we did a lot of video content, but we also supplemented in with a little bit of photos as well. We showcased things like the outside of their actual roaster. We showcased things like their team and who's actually involved, them working with other brands, them having people try their new flavors of coffee. All of those things, like I said, fit into one of those categories of buckets of content, and it made it extremely easy to scale. A bonus tip, after you've run this out for 1 month, as you go into the second month, before you do anything, I would evaluate your analytics to a T. It could be that one of the videos that they post about how we shot with this one cafe does a lot better than showing the roasting process. Maybe more cafes want to see how they work with people on a relationship basis than they want to see of how they actually roast their coffee. What that would then tell us is that when we make our content next month, we're probably going to put the majority of things in that bucket of what people actually want to see, and then shorten those other buckets so that way we're making content that really drives home and connects with our potential viewer, potential future customer. I know this was a little more simple of a breakdown, but hopefully this helps as far as figuring out how you can actually go about filming a lot of content in a very short amount of time and doing it extremely efficiently. So I already know I'm gonna get comments that are like, you didn't actually shoot 1 day, you shot over 3 days. Yes, technically speaking, but the reality is that the time frame was a lot shorter than had we dedicated 1 full day to doing everything. Comment down below if you've tried this strategy before and if you've had success or failures with it. Let me know. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.